the world is busy in many things. Pandemic has taken a lot of oxygen out of the conversation, but that's a serious issue. Everyone is talking about it, but atomic scientists are also concerned. They have set the doomsday clock to 100 seconds, and they seems to say that it is stuck there. And we have co-chair of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist, and he is a professor of the University of Chicago in the Department of Physics, Astronomy, and Astrophysics, Daniel Holz. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell us about this atomic clock, why it is stuck, and what are the seriousness about it?
Yeah, so this is, the clock is something that's set by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. So this is an organization founded by a bunch of scientists that in 45, the organization was founded to kind of address the potential for existential threats, to think about them and try to mitigate them. And so there was a feeling, the scientists had been involved in the Manhattan Project, and there was a feeling that these new nuclear weapons had the potential to wipe out everyone, and therefore we want to inform the public and engage to prevent that from happening. And so the clock, the doomsday clock, was a kind of a symbolic representation of how close we are to annihilation. And every year, the scientists affiliated with the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, it's actually a very big group with a wide range of expertise, come together and set the time and make an assessment of what is the current threat level, how close are we to wiping ourselves out.
Well, Professor, you are at the University of Chicago, where the, which is connected with the Fermi lab, connected with the nuclear project, where human being probably achieved the first sustainable chain reaction. Are there professors who really study this doomsday thing, or it is sort of a symbolic thing you come together in a meeting and decide?
So it's a range. I mean, as you said, I mean, the scientists that kind of founded this organization were involved in a lot of the research leading to the development of nuclear weapons, as well as just insights into nuclear physics in general. And they felt a responsibility because of this to be engaged in the discussion about these weapons. And to kind of alert the populace to their risks. And so in that sense, the expertise is very directly relevant. Now, more generally, there's a perception that science can be this double-edged sword, where it offers potential benefits, huge benefits, but it also carries with it some risks. And it's important to kind of keep that in mind and to balance those. And so part of the job of the Bulletin and scientists such as myself is to think about that. Now, I'm day to day, I study black holes and astrophysics, but I spend some of my time also thinking about these sorts of issues, talking with people, reading the literature, and trying to grapple with this other side, the kind of threats and what we might be able to do about them.
Well, first of all, people are talking about pandemic, but people, which has taken so many millions of lives, people are concerned about climate change. So within that noise, are there enough people who are talking about the threat which are posed by nuclear weapons?
Yeah,
so maybe faster than any of these things?
Yeah, so that's a great point, and a very important one. And you're right. I mean, it's in general, we think right now our assessment is that there are a number of clear threats. And what we're talking about, these are really existential threats. So they will impact civilization as we know it. And as you mentioned, climate change is certainly one of them. But the kind of the first threat, the threat that is most pressing, remains nuclear weapons, in the sense that There are still thousands of nuclear weapons. They're on hair trigger alert, and they could be launched at any moment. And in 30 minutes, tens of millions of people will die, maybe hundreds of millions, and civilization as we know it will end. And that's a major concern. Climate change is also a major concern. It's longer timescale, but can be just as dramatic. And then there are other concerns too, as you mentioned. Pandemics can be a concern. Also, just the general polarization of society, what we call cyber information warfare, so active misinformation and disinformation, the kind of failure of public discourse and rational discussion about these issues which threaten us is also very, very frightening, and is something we think about a lot. So there are lots of things to worry about, but as you said, I think there's a perception that the nuclear threat is old and past, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. And unfortunately, that just isn't the case, because these weapons are still out there, and it's still we're in a position where one person, for example, the president of the United States, has the sole authority, can push a button, and we're all wiped out, the whole planet. And that seems like a very delicate place to be.
Professor Holz, I came to, received an invitation to participate in a seminar, or was it a webinar, by Council for Foreign Relations, which is one of the leading think tanks in our country. And the topic was that the conventional warfare is possible between the nuclear powers. When I saw this, oh my God, what happened to things getting out of hand and acceleration? Are there some scholars paying attention to this type of consideration, that nuclear powers can fight conventional warfare and will not get into a nuclear disaster?
Yes, so that is a major area of concern. And for example, with what's happening now in Ukraine, it's hard not to kind of be thinking about, how does this evolve, and could it devolve into a nuclear exchange? One of the things that would be helpful along these lines would be a declared no first use policy. And so, if, for example, the United States and Russia and other nuclear powers would agree never to use a nuclear weapon first, that they're only defensive retaliatory weapons, then that might reduce the probability that they would ever be used. And then maybe in these sorts of exchanges, if people hold to that, then it would only be conventional weapons. So there's a lot of thinking about, given that conflicts will continue to arise, how to prevent them from spiraling into something that threatens all of humanity.
Professor Holz, one of the concerns I have is, within the first semester, I went to University of Chicago. Everybody in my class, everyone knew that, oh, this is the place. There was some level of pride for the nuclear era beginning at the University of Chicago. But I never heard, I went to political science and public policy, any ethical concern, the responsibility of the institution which began this era for the humanity, which definitely have a lot of benefit, has this extraordinary potential. So are there some students, are there some professors in physics or multidisciplinary committees, which University of Chicago is so known for, deliberate on the ethical aspect and ethical responsibility in terms of de-acceleration of the nuclear technology, in terms of weaponization, and things of this area?
Yeah, and in fact, the Bulletin is a great example, because it was founded when it was first founded, it was called the Atomic Scientists of Chicago. And it was really a Chicago-based organization of scientists that were dedicating themselves to exactly the sorts of issues you're talking about. They were worried about ethical issues. They were, worried about the way these weapons would be used and what the consequences would be. And they were spending a lot of their time, thinking about these issues, writing about them. They would get engaged. They were advising, policymakers. They were doing everything they could to make a difference. And that organization has grown, and now it's an international organization. But there's a lot of still a strong Chicago presence, myself included, and the former chair, Bob Rosner, who's a professor in astrophysics, also very involved. And historically, over the years, many U Chicago scientists have been involved, in part exactly because you said you feel as a faculty member here that you have a responsibility because this institution has played such a large role in the history of these weapons. Now, having said all that, I think at this point there's a much broader awareness, including, as we talked about, climate change as a major threat. And so there are a lot more faculty all across campus that are thinking about these issues. And there are various groups that are kind of coming together to try to address them more systematically. And so that's something I'm, particularly, interested in, is seeing, where this goes. I think there's an awareness that we're at feels like a unique moment in time, and quite a frightening one, and that's related to the current setting of the clock, which, as you mentioned, was 100 seconds to midnight, which is the closest it's ever been. So in the history of this clock, including the Cold War, this is the closest, in our assessment, we've ever been to annihilation. And so that's, sobering to think about. It's causing, many people to want to engage with this and try to, do what we can to avert, to move away from midnight, turn back the clock. And so it's very active.
So, Professor Holz, how has been the coverage of this thing? I mean, I was looking in the here and there. I don't see many in media covering this particular issue that, your clock is set so close to it.
Yeah, so there's been some coverage. It's there's a lot of news now, and so it's hard to get your message heard. But at least the setting of the clock every year reaches a lot of people, millions of people. It was discussed on some of the late night TV shows. A lot of interviews in various media outlets. I think the Washington Post had an article about it. So did the Chicago Tribune. So there's some coverage. Of course, we think the whole world should stop and pay attention to this because this is something that affects everyone and is so incredibly pressing and important and vital. But at least some people.
I understand.
And it's even having you bring me on, I just everything makes a difference. This is very important.
Professor Holz, I'm 100% with you. I'm a donor of the Bulletin and I'm a subscriber to it. But one of the things is that it does provide us information. But what individuals can do, what our non-profit organizations can do, what Congress can do, I feel that the Bulletin, in terms of alerting and keeping people informed, is good. But in terms of advocacy, I mean, look at kids. Kids are the one who start recycling at schools and home, and now parents adopt it. Now they're marching for the climate change.
Yeah.
We need some of those type of attention to such a potential disaster, which everybody is investing billions of dollars to freshen it up.
Yeah. So I agree with you that we're trying to find ways to have action, have kind of results, and have I mean, we don't want to just talk about this issue. We want to engender positive action and, as I said, move back the clock. And so that's something we spend a lot of time thinking about trying to come up with ways to do that. What we're most qualified to do is talk about the threats and try to build awareness of what the issues are. And so that's, as you referred to, there's the Bulletin, where we have, what we think of as a wide range of, very carefully thought through, meticulous articles about, the threats we face and what might be done, and suggestions for things to consider. What we avoid doing is becoming, overly partisan and prescriptive in the sense of, here is the clear policy and this is what must be done, and going and pleading with Congress to do this. That has not been, we feel, the best way for us to use our resources. So our focus has been on informing and trying to inspire action. And to that extent, we definitely, there are a lot of young people involved, and we get, lots of feedback saying that we're impacting people's behavior. But we always welcome ideas for how we can kind of increase our impact and magnify it. And in fact, right now, as part of this clock setting, we announced this, hashtag turn back the clock, where we're welcoming ideas and suggestions and dialogue around how best we can affect change, and specifically along the lines of what you're asking.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Daniel Holz, for your work on this. And Daniel Holz is a co-chair of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, Science and Security Board, and is a professor of physics at the University of Chicago. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you so much, Malik, for having me on. I really appreciate it.